everybody, it's Michelle. Earlier today I posted a video I did. It was another ride with me video, and I told you a little story. It wasn't really very scary, but it was kind of creepy and gross, and I hope y'all check that out. Plus, last week I told you on my Facebook page, and just to let everybody know, my Facebook page is not under Michelle Elks. It's under Christina Oliver. All right, but anyway, long story longer, I told you on my Facebook page that I was going to tell you a couple of urban legends on Mondays and Fridays, and I told a couple on Monday, and I've got a good one for you today. So I'm going to read that to you, but before I do that, I've got something to tell you. When I was on my way home from where I went earlier today, I went and got a milkshake from Chick-fil-A, and when I got back into my little neighborhood, there, like I've told you in some other videos of mine, I have a big pond in my neighborhood, and it's right up the street from my house. So I get through the gates, I get into the neighborhood, and come up on the pond there here in my neighborhood. And I stop right in the middle of the road. Well, I pull over to the side of the road, and there is a huge snapping turtle in the middle of the road, and I've got a picture of him on my Facebook page. But anyway, I'm sitting there thinking to myself, today's Friday. Today's the day that a bunch of work trucks and stuff are here in the neighborhood because the maintenance crew comes out and cleans our neighborhood. So anyway, I'm thinking, if I don't save this turtle, or at least get him out of the road, he's gonna get hit and crushed, and I would feel really bad. So I stop the car, I park it over to the right-hand side of the road, and I jump out, and I can, mind you, there's like a lot of people in their yards, and the maintenance crew, people are watching me, and I get out of the car and run out, and I go try to grab this big snapping turtle out of the road. Well, first of all, the pond is not 10 steps away from where I'm standing, and I'm thinking, well, maybe the turtle's on his way over to the pond. So I go try to pick him up, and when I do, he starts to backtrack. He's going away from the pond. So I'm like, oh, I gotta get him, because if not, I'm the one that messed him up. So I go and pick him up. He's huge. But I pick him up, and I start running across the street over to the pond, and I'm thinking, oh, I saved him. But as soon as I got to the pond, he literally jumps out of my hands and goes head first into the water. I'm thinking, yes, I saved him. So God was on his side today. All right. Well, I found an urban legend story. I've only got one for you today, but it's a little bit long. But anyway, the story that I'm going to tell you today is called House of Mirrors. I've never heard of this one. I was actually looking up Bloody Mary. Her real name was Mary Tudor. And through looking for her, I've come across another one called House of Mirrors, and I read it, and it's a little bit long, but it's good. And I hope you like it. I'm going to read it for you now. It says that the House of Mirrors is a creepy, true story about an abandoned mansion in Cadiz, Spain, that is said to be haunted by the ghost of a girl who was murdered by her own mother. And this is kind of sad, but anyway, okay, here we go. There is a house in the old part of the Spanish city of Cadiz, C-A-D-I-Z. I guess I'm saying it right. I don't know. Anyway, it is known as La Casa de los Espejos, something like that, or the House of Mirrors. Okay, it is an imposing and elegant three-story house with architecture that evokes its Spanish past. This innocent facade fools no one, because anybody in this town who believes in ghosts and knows the mansion's history always steers well clear of the place at night, as would I. Legend has it that years ago, an important admiral in the Spanish Navy lived in the house with his wife and young daughter. The admiral's job meant that he was often away from home for really long periods of time because his ship traveled from port to port. His journeys took him to many different and exotic foreign countries. They say that the admiral loved and cherished his beautiful daughter more than life itself. Whenever he left, his daughter would wave goodbye with tears streaming down her cheeks. She missed him more than anything else in the world. His daughter collected mirrors, and so, as a token of his deep affection for her, each time he returned from one of his trips, he would bring her back a new mirror as a present. As the years passed, the house became filled with more and more ornate and exquisite mirrors. The girl enjoyed walking around her home and being able to gaze at her own reflection in each of the mirrors. Her father often boasted to his friends and colleagues that his daughter was the most beautiful girl in town. Over the years, the admiral's wife had grown old and lost her looks. She hated having to see herself in the mirrors and became very jealous of her beautiful daughter. How do you get jealous of your children? That's crazy. Anyway, gradually the woman sank into the depths of depression, and her resentment towards her own daughter increased with a lot of intensity. The arguments and fights between mother and daughter became more and more frequent during the periods in which the admiral was away at sea. The mother and daughter relationship was irretrievably contaminated by the secret hatred that grew in the mother's spiteful heart. She became convinced that her husband loved her daughter more than he did his own wife. Blinded by jealousy, her thoughts grew dark and vengeful. On the day the admiral left on his final trip, his wife took the opportunity to put an awful plan into action. She gave her daughter a poisoned drink. The poor girl drank the poison and suffered for days, bleeding from the mouth and eyes before she slipped into a coma and she died. The mother was convinced that with the daughter out of the way, she and her husband could rekindle their love. The father returned a week later and was met at the front door by his wife. She calmly informed him that their daughter had contracted a horrible disease and died while he was away. Upon hearing the terrible news, the man burst into tears. He was completely devastated and spent the next few days sitting in his daughter's bedroom, head in hands, weeping bitterly. Late one night, as the father was wiping the tears from his eyes, he happened to glance into one of the mirrors that hung on the bedroom wall. What he saw made him tremble with fear. In the mirror stood the ghostly figure of his beloved child. As he watched, a shocking scene unfolded in the mirror. His daughter was sending him a message from beyond. Reflected in the mirror, he saw his wife poisoning a drink and offering it to his daughter. He watched as his daughter laid in bed, blood pouring from her eyes and her mouth, screaming out in pain. At her bedside, his wife silently gloated. The sight of his beloved child thrashing about in agony before finally succumbing to the deadly poison was more than the poor man could handle. Stunned and full of anger, having discovered the awful truth about his wife, the admiral ran downstairs and grabbed his wife by the arms. He forced her to confess to the crime and then marched her down to the local police station and turned her in. The woman was put on trial for the murder of her daughter and sentenced to spend the rest of her days alone behind the bars of a filthy prison cell, and I hope she was tormented forever. However, the father never recovered from the death of his only daughter. He simply could not bear to go on living in the house where she had been so cruelly murdered. Each mirror reminded him of his daughter's beauty, and he was unable to get over the pain of her loss. He left the town and moved far away in an effort to forget his past. The house lay abandoned for decades, and its walls still covered with mirrors. People who lived nearby claimed that late at night they could hear screams echoing around the old building. They said that it sounded like a young girl crying out in pain. Some brave souls ventured into the house to investigate the mysterious sounds. The noises seemed to be coming from the top floor. They heard the pitiful weeping and wailing of child splitting the silence of the night. The screams were so strange that they seemed to bounce off the mirrors as if the sounds were emanating from each one. One curious and careless individual accidentally broke one of the mirrors. They saw that when he picked up the fragments and looked at them, they did not reflect his face. Instead, reflected in the mirror, he was horrified to see a dead girl. Her face bore an expression of anger that sent a chill down his spine and made him run screaming from the house. Others who visited the house claimed that they caught a glimpse out of the corner of their eye of a girl watching them from inside the mirrors. Upon seeing this, some fled the house in terror, counting themselves lucky to have escaped with their lives. As the years passed, the history of the House of Mirrors and what had happened there began to spread from Cadiz to the rest of Mexico. The legend became so famous that many teenagers came from far and wide to explore the old, dilapidated building at night. Most of them wanted to either demonstrate their courage or investigate whether it was possible to look in the mirrors and catch a fleeting glimpse of the murdered girl. A few years ago, some young people began organizing trips to the old place. They held a contest to see who would dare to stay the longest inside the haunted mansion. They said that once you spend a few minutes inside the House of Mirrors, you won't dare enter a second time. All right, well, I read that story to you today. It was called House of Mirrors, and it kind of reminded me a little bit about Bloody Mary. And I tried that one time, and it scared me so bad. I think I might have been about 12, 13 years old. And then a few weeks ago, I was reading the story again, and I was like, oh, this will be cool to tell on my YouTube page or YouTube channel. And I thought I would go look up actually the history of the actual girl. Mary Tudor is her name. She was actually sister to Mary Elizabeth. Not Mary Elizabeth, who am I talking about? Queen Elizabeth. But anyway, I'm going to, over the weekend, look up all this information about her, and on Monday, I will give you the full story of Bloody Mary. All right, well, I hope y'all enjoyed the story I told you about today earlier in my other video, and I hope you enjoyed the House of Mirrors. So I will probably see y'all on Monday. If y'all like this video, please comment down below and let me know. If not, let me know too. Okay? And once again, I love you all, and please subscribe to my channel. All right, y'all. I'll see y'all Monday. Bye.